All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of We Do the Work. We've got Alex Schlinsky in the podcast room with us today. Super excited. We've been trying to set this up for a couple of months now.
Yes.
Yeah, both very busy. I don't like the word busy. Let's say productive, right? We lead very productive lives.
Agreed.
I was, putting my notes together for this episode and kind of thinking like how we first met. And I think my first introduction to you was through a Facebook ad with one of the local POD events that you were hosting here in Tampa.
Yes.
That I went to, which was awesome. And we became Facebook friends. And then you introduced me to Vito, the man that built.
Thank you, Vito.
Right?
What a legend. Yeah, he set up my office too, which is great. All the videos that you might see on my end, he did the same thing. Regarding that productivity thing, by the way, just one quick comment that I always found really valuable. One of the frames of reference I have for when I'm overly busy or feel overwhelmed, like in the tidal wave of life, not just in business, but we're both parents as well and, spouses. It's like I get to do this is one of those things, right? Like we'll probably talk about my surgery and everything and like being alive in the first place is great. But I love that concept of like, I get to do this. I don't know like who I heard it from, maybe Tony Robbins first, but it's been reiterated, 150 times from someone that both of us respect, William Attaway. I like to think that way because I find myself like, oh man, I'm overworked. I'm really overdoing this, but it's like, I get to do this. So I try to think that way.
I don't have to. I get to do this. We Do the Work is dedicated to those who believe in the tenacious pursuit of their dreams. In a world where we aim to turn ceilings into floors, we dive deep into the essence of health, wealth, and relationships, uncovering that true fulfillment lies not in our achievements, but in the journey of us doing the work. Exactly. One of the things that we were talking off camera earlier that you get to do now is you just started working out with a personal trainer.
Yes.
So you get to do that.
I like that frame.
Right?
I like that frame because I'm not in that frame yet.
I know, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs experience putting your health on the back burner due to prioritizing your baby, which is your business.
100%.
And, I've fallen into that trap. So talk to me about like, why is this kind of so top of mind right now that you're going out, you're investing into these things, right? I always, one of my favorite Dan Martell quotes, show me your calendar, show me your bank account, and I'll, show you your priorities.
Sure.
So you're prioritizing that. Where does this come from?
I think the cognitive dissonance that I've had as like the person that I identify myself as, like I have these very strong values that I identify myself as being like a good person, a good coach, a trustworthy person, a person that backs up their word. And to most people that know me and their window view of my life, I back those things up most of the time. Obviously, I'm not perfect by any means, but the person that knows you best, meaning myself, I know all the times that I fall short of my disciplinary ideas that I have, and I fall short of them quite a bit, whether it's household chores, business things, but mostly through my life has been fitness related things because I grew up like with the, quote unquote good metabolism. So like eat stupidly didn't pay for that, right? Two older brothers who didn't really work out, parents that didn't really work out. So it's just like, over time, it hasn't really affected me so much. I'm not like necessarily overweight, but I'm also like 33, but I feel older than 33. I had open heart surgery and don't want to have that again and feel like I'm prioritizing things appropriately and being there for my son. So, last year, I mentioned this, I paid someone for consulting online because that's what I do also, but I just didn't have the discipline for it. And the disappointment I had in myself for not showing up for myself because it wasn't a monetary thing. Like for monetary things, I show up, I always show up, which is just silly. It's like, what's more important, my health or my money? And I literally went through an experience where I almost died and I'm still prioritizing money over it. So this was just like an indication of I have to be in person with someone that knows what to do. So I don't have to take my time to try to learn it because I won't. And then they'll tell me what to do and I'll reap the rewards of it. So did 4 sessions so far, almost wanted to die on Friday. Today's session was okay. First 2 sessions, he set me up is all I'll say. He set me up. I thought it was going to be easy. It's definitely not easy, but I'm happy to at least do it.
Yeah, so I also have an in-person personal trainer, meet with her 5 days out of the week, and I think it makes all of the difference for the accountability. And,
huge.
I think, yes, the physical aesthetics aspect is awesome, but I just know that I am a sharper entrepreneur when I am, going to the gym and being consistent with that. There was also like a a big turning point when my son Cruz was born. I think, I was 36 when he was born. So when you start doing the math of like when he's going to graduate high school and how old you're going to be, and wanting to spend as much time as possible with them, right? And I'm hoping that Elon Musk is going to be the man to help prolong our lives so that I can have some more time with my son, right? Like, can we make it to 120, 130 years old? But yeah, I think I look at, because you work with a lot of entrepreneurs, right? Through POD. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about POD?
Yeah, so basically POD is an online mentorship community, mostly for agency owners. We do work with some other people as well that we've been running. We're going on our 9th year now, which is really cool.
Oh, wow.
Pretty amazing. The long and short of it basically is, I grew up in community and Orthodox Jewry community, and I wanted that same thing for entrepreneurs because business can be like really lonely. Most people, as you know, Chris, don't have this office with all these people. Most people are just like in this little square by themselves on Zoom, and they like use Facebook groups or whatever as a resource for community. But I really wanted to desperately build my own level of community, run events, which I love doing. It's so much fun doing that stuff. So that's what we've been doing at Prospecting on Demand for 9 years, helping these people build better businesses, better agencies at scale, following the anti-hustle model, which is kind of my main mantra, and trying to ultimately like build a better life, not just a better business.
I love that. And you also run an agency on top of that. Tell me about that.
So I started my agency in 2010 as a side hustle when I was graduating high school. So the simplest version of it is when I was in high school, I wanted to become an attorney. That was like my main thing. It's kind of stereotypical for like Jews to become like attorneys or doctors or accountants. There's like some truth to some of the stereotypes. And in general, like I could tell, arguing was definitely one of my skills, also known as sales, but it was definitely arguing then. And that has a lot to do with like how you were able to conduct yourself and communicate, obviously as a litigating attorney. A lot of people in my network I knew were litigating attorneys. So I got an internship in my end of junior year, going into senior year with my next door neighbor who was an attorney. And I remember like going into his car on the first day of our internship, driving to the Miami Beach courthouse. And he was like, Alex, why do you want to become an attorney? And I like gave him the whole, like, I want to make a difference in the world and like that whole thing. And he said to me, which I'll never forget, my goal is to make sure that you don't become an attorney. And he went on to explain to me for the next 30 minutes how much he hates his life, how much he hates being an attorney. He hates all the people he works with. He got trapped because he's in school. He can't possibly pivot. And it was crazy because I did not grow up in a like hard knocks life style of communication. Both my parents were the type of people like, you can do anything you set your mind to. And I was that annoying teenager, like, I can't fly. That's kind of how my brain was, instead of just appreciating the nurturing environment that obviously a lot of people don't have in growing up, which I'm extremely grateful for that I had. But I really never had anyone tell me like how hard things are, really. And so that just like, I was very, very impressionable. And it was enough, just that 30 minutes, to be like, clearly, this is not what I'm doing. So I went to school to become a psychologist. And in that time, I needed to make money for school. I went to UCF in Orlando. Facebook pages had just come out at this time. And the attorney was pretty smart. He was like, I think this is going to become a big thing. So I'll pay you $1,000 if you post for me every day and see if I get business. And of course he did. This is before ads came out. So they were like pushing it to local people. And they're like, oh, I'm getting business from this. Amazing.
The good old days of being able to post on your Facebook business page and like get leads immediately.
Yeah, you got 50,000 likes on a business page now and you get 100 people reached. It's crazy. Yeah. Same thing as communities also. So we did that for him. It was great. I thought, I'm the smartest person, side hustler is incredible. And then I got a few more clients from him when I went to UCF, just because he went to UF in Orlando or UF in Gainesville for law school. And I asked him if he knew anyone that was practicing in Orlando. He sent me like 20 attorneys. About 10 of them became clients. So I was doing constant contact newsletters, posting every day. My wife and I, my girlfriend at the time, just every single day, like waking up an hour early to try to get them all out. And we retained most of those clients. So like one of my fun like keynotes that I do at like any of the events that I speak at is like, I ran an agency for 4 years and I had no idea, because I didn't have a paradigm of what a marketing agency was. My parents had never heard of that before. I was just doing posting for social media. That wasn't like a business. I didn't look it up. I didn't research it. I did nothing. I was just focused on school and making this money. And then when I finished school and realized, okay, I don't want to become a psychologist, and I looked it up and started getting ads from, Dan Henry and from Dave Rogenmoser, and realizing this is like a biz op and ClickFunnels and Russell Brunson. I was like, holy crap, I've already been doing this for like 4 years. This is crazy. Never once ran an ad, never once knew anything about business development at all. And I was like, well, I really need to focus on this. So that's how like the genesis of Sky Social Media started.
I love it. I did not know that.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. But I did know that you were a journalist for the UFC at some point.
Yes. And the Miami Dolphins.
You know, we work with martial artists over here, so we're really big UFC fans.
Yes.
Just give me a quick thing about that.
Yeah, that was, I mean, one of the first things I connected with on, because I saw like you were with Matt Arroyo, right? And I used to be obsessed with The Ultimate Fighter. I watched every single episode. I was like absolutely obsessive about it. So I knew who Matt Arroyo was right away because he was on the show. But yeah, I think when I was, you know, one of my big hobbies still today, which is funny because in entrepreneurship, it's not so common, but like I'm a very, very diehard sports fan. Again, most people I meet, especially successful entrepreneurs in terms of like financial success, most people don't really care about sports, like, but I am absolutely obsessed with like the Miami Dolphins, the Miami Heat, and the UFC. And so when I left school, I didn't know what I was going to do next. And I didn't know that this business I had was sustainable. So I thought, you know, I could do anything I set my mind to. So I emailed, exactly. So I emailed like probably 500-600 different types of websites with help from a VA that I learned online from Dave Rogelmoser, huge shout out to him, and got a byline. And when I got the byline, it was on Fansided, which was a Sports Illustrated affiliate. So I did say that I worked at Sports Illustrated, which was only like a half truth, but not a full lie. So it was solid. It was solid. So when I messaged them, I'm like, oh, cool. So like I'm credentialed now, right? And they're like, no, you have to get credentialed now by the Dolphins and by the UFC. So for the UFC, I never actually got credentialed to go to an event, but I was credentialed to do media, which bummer because I really wanted to. I did it for World Series of Fighting, which ended up getting purchased by PFL. Justin Gaethje was the headliner for one of the fights that I did in South Florida, which was incredible. He's obviously a legendary UFC fighter, probably a Hall of Famer now. And so for the Dolphins, though, probably like the thing I'm most proud of in my whole career was I called the Dolphins every single day before training camp for 2 months straight to speak to the PR director, Jason Jenkins. And every single day I would get the same objection from his intake team. Like, oh, Jason's at lunch. Hey, Jason's on a meeting. Oh, Jason's this. He'll call you back every single day. But my mindset at the time was I have nothing to lose to just call every single day at the same time, even if I'm rejected over and over. And I say this line that sounds really sexy, but I don't know if I actually felt this way because it's in retrospect. But like I was willing to hear no more than they were willing to say it. Again, that's in retrospect, knowing what the end scenario was. I don't really remember what I thought at that time, other than like, please give me the chance. And I remember calling one day and she's like, oh, Jason's in his office. I'll connect you now. They connect me. The hold music's on. It's like that elevator music. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm going to say.
What are you going to say?
Jason picks up the phone. Jason Jenkins, Miami Dolphins. How can I help you? Jason, Dolphins fan, media, please, now. That's basically what I said. And he's like, you're credentialed, we'll see you. Went to all of training camp, went to 6 Dolphins games that season as a media member, which is funny. Like I'm a very extremely loud personality and you're not allowed to do that in media. So I did get admonished probably 7 times, if not more, from celebrating for touchdowns or whatever it may be. But yeah, coolest thing I've ever done in business. Made $0. You literally make nothing. The website, for you guys wondering, the website paid me $1 per 1,000 views on an article, with the average article getting under 1,000 views.
Wow.
So yeah, do the math. Not great. So I figured out if I post about Tom Brady, Conor McGregor, or Ronda Rousey, that's the only time I'll make money. So I tried to make every Dolphins post about how to beat Tom Brady and every MMA post about particularly first Ronda, because the numbers when Ronda, I was doing the UFC for MMA Mania at the time, when Ronda got knocked out by Holly Holm, which was like the biggest moment in the UFC of the last 20 years, probably. And I was the person, the headliner, and it was like 500,000 views on my article. I was like, oh my God, I just made $500. This is incredible. And that was like more money than I made for like 4 months.
I remember that fight. I was at one of the Tampa sports bars here, and just the entire crowd erupted.
Oh yeah, crazy. Absolutely wild moment. She's very, very strong personality. Some people are huge fans, other people not so much. I was a really big fan. I got to see her fight live, and probably the coolest live sporting event I've ever been to, besides maybe the NBA Finals, but it was incredible. It was unreal. There's
a lesson in your persistence with calling the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you're really great at is sales training.
Yeah.
And that's where my mindset went instantly is, man, I want my sales guys to have that level of persistence. So because you work with, a lot of entrepreneurs, you help them develop their sales teams. What do you think are, and again, we have agency owners that are listening. We have martial arts school owners that are listening. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see, in the sales realm?
Yeah. So the other context as well, not only do I work with agency owners, I also do a lot of outside sales consulting for like actual brick and mortar businesses. So like Restore Hyper Wellness, several different companies here locally in Tampa and a few others. I just love like the idea of sales psychology and the most common objection I get. So like if someone's not an agency owner listening, like what would this guy know about like MMA, or what would he know about like gym memberships? It's decision-making. Ultimately, decision-making psychology is the same for all human beings. There's of course contextual insight per niche that you want to like fix, but in general, like the baseline is always the same. Probably the biggest, most important factor that I see in all sales, across the entire like entrepreneur landscape is this concept of not actually selling, but spreading awareness. So you're selling in spite of yourself. So like in a general sense, most people really, really struggle with decision making. Like most human beings have a really hard time identifying like what they're going to watch on Netflix, what they're going to wear that day, what they're going to eat. Then there's like certain people, I think you're probably one of them. It's like an extremely organized person. They know exactly what they're doing from 9 to 5. They know exactly how they're doing it. Everything's set out. But the people that are like that, like you, they think everyone else is like that, but it's not. It's the exact opposite. They're like the 1%. The large majority of people let kind of the tidal wave of life take them, like wherever this thing's happening, like, oh, I forgot this thing. I forgot that responsibility, until like the very important things are there. You won't forget to pick up your kid. You won't forget to pay your bills. Hopefully, we said at the same time. Some people screw that up. Most people don't. But then other things slip through the cracks, like that show they really wanted to watch that they said they wanted to watch for 6 months. They never do because they never put the time in for it. And so in lieu of actually guiding decisions, people spread awareness. So for example, I did consulting for Restore Hyper Wellness, which was a lot of fun. They have like 100 something locations, and I did a webinar with them.
They do like cryo and massage and IVs, stuff like that, right? And
so I did some auditing of calling local restores to see how they would handle me on the intake. Because like the first portion of any sales is how you handle intake. So a lot of people in the agency space will do these like 2 call closes, which is asinine, but they'll basically do this like qualification. Like, okay, you are essentially qualified. Let's do a demo conversation, which again, makes no sense. We could talk about that later, but that's the same thing that people do in like almost every brick and mortar. Like, okay, I'm qualifying to see if you're a good fit, and then we'll talk about what we can do to help you. So I want to see how they're qualifying on the intake. So I call them up and I'm like, hey, I want to prioritize my health, and I've heard great things about you. What do you guys do? Like, how do you explain it? And instead of asking me questions, right, to offer me a potential solution to a problem I have, she just went on to explain every single thing that they do. We do massage, we do cryo, we do this, we do that. I'm like, oh, what's the pricing? And then she went on to explain every single price, as if I'm going to get off the phone and be like, I'm so confident I should do cryo at the membership price of $89. Let's do that now. It's never going to happen, right? And this is so common. People just spread awareness. And so like the easiest way to frame this is understanding like decision-making psychology, right? There's explicit decisions, which are decisions that you are consciously making that match your values and deciding factors of I want to do this. And then implicit decision-making, which is just like ambivalence or indifference. And oftentimes that leads to procrastination, right? So anything that requires our 2 most valuable resources, which is our time and our money, right? No one does that implicitly. It's always consistently going to be an explicit decision, like I want this. But because they don't know how to say I want this, they're going to fall back into procrastination. They're just going to push off the decision consistently over and over and over. And they don't even know that they're doing that. They don't even know that. So everything that I teach in terms of people that are selling, it's how can you guide this specific person, not the avatar. So not the gym owner, not the, Restore Hyper Wellness owner, not the attorney, but like the person you're speaking to, the Brad, the David, the Crystal, etc. How can you help that person with their specific things that they want and curate a specific offer to them based on the expertise? So the easiest way I explain this is basically the concept of understanding options when it comes to decisions, right? Probably most people have heard like overwhelmed prospects don't buy, right? Confused mind doesn't buy. So here's an example, okay? If I say, do you want a Snickers? How many options did I give you?
1.
Okay, so I gave you 1 option in terms of you can choose a Snickers, but you have 3 options to choose from in terms of your deciding factor. You could say, yes, I want the Snickers. You could say, no, I don't want the Snickers. And you could say, maybe. Maybe is anything that's not yes or no, which is the most common response in any decision. The maybe is, I need to talk to my partner about it. I need to think about it. I need to move money around.
Check the macros.
Exactly. I need to wait until after the holidays. Blah, blah, blah. All the maybes, right? And so now if we take the next step and I say, do you want a Snickers or a Twix? How many options did I give you?
2.
So again, in that format, if you say yes, no, maybe to Snickers and yes, no, maybe to Twix, and then there's potentially a 7th option, which you could say is like both. I don't really argue that point, but the point is at least 6 potential considerations. The real problem is decisions go to die at compare and contrast. Well, I really like the caramel here, but the chocolate on this is better. I prefer the nougat over there. And that's where they can't decide because they're no longer in a place of confidence. They're a place of uncertainty. So if they're going to the candy dealer and they're telling the candy dealer, hey, these are the specific things that I'm looking for. Dark chocolate, nougat, and this, they're like, okay, you need the dark Heath bar. That's going to be your option as the salesperson, not here's 6 options, because that's not the responsibility of the actual salesperson. Most salespeople just give a bunch of options and then wonder why they're struggling. Or in lieu of an option, they'll give basically like an unexposed option. They'll be like, you're good for our silver plan, which inherently means you also have a gold plan and probably a platinum plan or a bronze plan, which defeats the purpose altogether, right? So like I have all my clients change it to like grow or plan or scale so that there's not an automatic indication that, well, what's your other option, right? So you see this so commonly in SaaS products where they're like looking and here's all the check marks. And it's why people have a hard time making a decision because they're not the expert, right? So like if my personal trainer says, well, do you want to do this or do this? I don't want to make the decision. I want the decision to be made for me. So the most important thing in selling is guiding a decision, not spreading awareness by going with what I call the guess who model of sales. So guess who? Classic children's game, right? You have a character and they have distinguishing features about the character. What's the first question that most people would ask? Is your character a male or a female, right? Because if it's a male, you're going to disqualify half of them and now you're moving on, right? You wouldn't just go in the game and be like, what about this? What about this? Just like guessing all the names. It makes no sense. It's the same concept. So you clarify specifically what they're looking for. What's your class schedule that you want? What's the thing that you want to focus on? How does this matter to you? Why is this important? The more questions you can ask that clarify specific to the prospect what they're looking for, the better you can feel as the expert salesperson to give them a very specific offer that you can then tell them to buy. And when I say this is where like most people get really worked up and have a hard time with. Like most people end sales calls with like, Chris, what do you think? Sure. And my thought process is like, who cares what they think? Because you already know what they think. They came to you with a problem, right? And you have this on your wall, which I love. It's something I talk about with my clients all the time. A problem well explained is a problem half solved. And I love that concept. Anyone that comes to you with a problem, they have like this indication or thought process, like they're doing something wrong or they don't know how to solve it. And I love commending them like, hey, just for the fact that you know there's an issue, there's something we can do to solve it. Like all the things you don't know that you're dealing with, those are the really bad problems, right? So if you go into a sales format with someone and you're asking at the end, what do you think? You're just lending them towards the consistent thought they're going to have, which is implicit decision-making, which is, I don't know what to think. I'm not sure I'm going to leave, right? So if you explicitly say, based on the factors you told me that you're here, you want to go here, your challenge has been this, I'm very confident that I can help you get there in this time frame. You should do this. It's what you've been looking for. People are more equipped to take that and work with it and actually achieve it. And the easiest way to explain it is like this concept. Everyone gets this, right? You say, hey, babe, what do you want to do for dinner tonight? What's the most common response to that? I don't know. What do you want to do? Why does everyone understand that? Why is that? No matter where you are, socioeconomic status, your race, your religion, where you live, everyone understands that concept. It's because the amount of decisions you have to make consciously every day, it's one of those ones most of the time, they're like, you decide, right? People want decisions made for them. So if you say, hey, we should go get sushi, even if you don't like sushi, there's a higher likelihood you're going to go get it because someone decided for you. It's the same thing in sales. And that's the biggest problem I see most commonly.
I think it's also like, you would think as the salesperson, I should make them aware of all of the things, right? I feel like that can sometimes just be their intuition. I love the way that you framed that. What are some go-to, let's say for an agency, we constantly hear the objection of, I've got to go talk with my partner.
Of course.
What's your advice for something like that? And should that have, been nipped in the bud before the call even happened?
Not necessarily before it even happened. I think the idea is like everyone wants this model of sales where like automatically you're going to close every single deal you get. when I'm coaching the one call close, inherently my goal and responsibility is like, I want to arm you with your Batman tool belt where you can pull every lever. If you pull every lever, but you don't get the sale, that just means you did all you could do, right? I focus on the locus of control. Like at the end of the day, there's no Harry Potter manipulation method tactic to be like, Leviatum Leviosa, and there's your wallet, done. Okay, great, I'm done. Like there's no such thing as that. So no matter how amazing you are, no matter how much work and effort you put in, no matter how asinine the objection is, at the end of the day, the other person has to still make their decision whether or not. So it's not a matter of do I get paid on the call? It's do I have all of the assets available to me to be able to? So for example, someone will come to me like, how do I do one call close selling to nonprofit organizations? And the answer is you don't. It's not possible, right? Right before this podcast we're doing, I'm telling you about a huge deal that my agency is working on. And we've done 7-8 calls for it, which is obviously not the one call close. The one call close isn't at the end result being I get paid. It's that I move to the next step, right? So if you're speaking to Rachel and you know Dominic is the end result, right? Your responsibility in the Rachel call is to sell Rachel advocacy. So Rachel can go advocate for you on the back end when she speaks to Dominic. You have to speak to Cris. She knows exactly what we need to do. I'm very confident in this because Dominic doesn't know or trust Cris, but Rachel is trusted. And now Rachel is advocating for you on the back end. That means you did your job. It doesn't mean, oh, I failed because I didn't get paid. It's not how it works. So like in a general sense, I don't like the idea of like, oh, we needed to nip it in the bud at the beginning or, no, I won't do this call. I feel like it's very sanctimonious, but it depends on the type of business you have, right? Like if you're a startup agency, take every call. If you have the right to and don't need to do multiple calls with the Rachel to get to Dominic, you could ask for Dominic right away, but most of the time it won't end up being like a really good experience by saying, you're not important to me. I want to speak to the main guy that's important. So if someone asks me directly or says to me directly on a call, like, I need to talk to my partner about it. There's kind of like a very specific framework I would go through. They have to be comfortable with trying. And it looks like this. The model will first always start by an actual appreciation for their transparency and an understanding. So validation of feeling, right? Like a lot of times people get invalidated and feel really bad. Like a particularly big mistake people make in sales is they like push on the pain the whole time. Like the person already feels bad. They already know they're doing things wrong. We're always our own worst enemy. And the whole time you're like, well, that's stupid. That was dumb. Why'd you do that? You're an idiot. And they're like, so you want to pay me? No, you just made me feel way worse than I did, right? So validation is really powerful and validation affirmation is really powerful. So it looks like this, 3, 2, 1. Hey, Cris, I totally respect and understand the desire to speak to your partner or your spouse. Obviously, I have one as well. So like, there's no pressure on my end. I'm not like, you have to decide right now or it's gone. I'm not that type of person. And I'm not asking you of that. I just want to make sure that I'm on the same page with you, right? If your partner says, I want to do this, we're going to move forward just for clarity. Now, before we continue on the role play, the concept of that objection is we're just isolating the variable. If we don't isolate the variable in selling, it's similar as algebra. You can't solve for the equation. So like the easiest one that everyone can implement, regardless of your business that you operate, is just separating value and price. If you don't separate value and price, you're going to really have a hard time in selling. So when you get to your point of it, you're about to share your price, just make sure that they want the product, right? Because if they don't want the product, it's irrelevant what the price is, right? It's irrelevant. So if like, yeah, I definitely want that. Let me share with me the price. Now you know that it's separated. So when they give you the price objection, you can work on that. If you don't get it separated and they give you the price objection, how are you going to deal with that? Now it's 2 different variables. In the same vein, when we're dealing with this partner objection. The partner objection, now they're like, yeah, absolutely, we're going to move forward. I absolutely want to do it. I just want to confirm with Shira in this case, right? I want to confirm with Shira. Hey, totally fine. I'm happy to do it. Let me ask you, did you enjoy the call? Honestly, like, was this a valuable experience and worthwhile experience? Because sales is a service. I'm trying to make sure that we're on the same page. Oh, I loved it. Amazing. Great. So here's 2 options I can give to you. Okay. Option 1 is you're more than welcome, of course, to go speak to your spouse yourself and try to reiterate what I said. But I'm also more than happy to give this experience to your spouse without them feeling any pressure or urgency. Like, you have to do it or you must do it. I'm not going to do that. So like, do you want me to schedule that time with them? Are you open to it? And as you can imagine, 90% of the time they'll say no to it, but you give them the option. There are several people that when you give that option to them, they're like, oh yeah, my spouse is really hard to convince on these things. I would love if you would do that. And they feel appreciated and they didn't want to ask for it because they're like, oh, I already took your time and I didn't pay you and we might not pay you. So it gives them that. And then you hit them with the last and most important factor of this positioned sales process, right? The last part is this, like, hey, do you mind if I share something like very transparent or blunt that would be really important to understand before we move forward, before we leave this call? Okay, so here's the thing, all right? I have the expectation that you want to work with me. You want your partner to agree to it, which is totally fair. And I think you have an expectation that they will agree. Is that right? What if they don't? What if they don't? What if they say no? Put this and volley this to the prospect, because most human beings, if they're being legitimate on objections, right? Some people like say objections because they don't have the audacity to say no, Alex, or no, Cris, which sucks. But like, again, I'm not being sanctimonious. I've done that before. I try not to do that anymore. Like I try to not, string people on, but
get their hopes up that the sale is going to happen.
It just happens. So I try not to do that. And other people do that. So you want to make sure that if they're being legitimate, like, okay, their expectation is that my partner is going to agree. That human beings' minds don't necessarily lend towards the idea like they're definitely going to disagree. Because if they did, they would tell you that up front. They would say, Rachel's really, really hard to like convince on these things. Instead, they wouldn't say, well, I just need to talk to my partner and we'll be good. So they're in the mindset of they're going to say yes. So now you put them in that process, you're forcing them to think of the worst case scenario, because that's the one thing that would kill the deal. And now they're put in the scenario to think of either one, I'll still go through with it, which is insane, but people say that.
Going to be sleeping on the couch.
Literally crazy. Night. Or two, then I would have to decline. So one, if they say yes, I'd still go through, then I would say this, hey, here's what you should do. If you're still going to go through, number one, I'd prefer we don't work together if your partner is not all in as well. Because like, I don't want to create some sort of vendor relationship where there's animosity built up and that I would have a worse effect on your business. My only intention is when we look back on this in 3, 6, 9, 12 months, that this was the best investment you've made. And I'll do everything I can to make that happen. Even if that means you're not going to work with me because they said no, and that means you have to say no. But that being said, I have a way to help you move forward with this effectively. You're open to that. Put down a $500 refundable deposit. What that does is it takes your word into action. And so when you go to Rachel and you communicate with her, like, I really want to do this. Alex, let me put down a refundable deposit to hold my spot and get everything ready. But he wanted you to have buy-in too, because clearly he cares about our relationship as well in the business and isn't just in it for the money. Because when you do that, Derek, the person I'm speaking to, what's going to happen is the decision was already made, but you're acknowledging that their decision in this is important as well. And you have a break glass in case of emergency, we'll give the money back. So if there's any concern at all that they're not going to be bought in, your word is not as strong as action. So if you take action, it will make it easier. Now, in coaching this, Cris, obviously been doing this a long time, less than in my business, I've refunded less than 10 paid deposits, like refundable deposits on both companies. I have, of course, done a few, but I mean, I've been in business like almost 15 years basically, and done less than 10 in POD and Sky Social probably combined, maybe a little bit more if I was like very clear, but very, very small amount is the point, because I take a lot of them. This is the most common objection, especially with attorneys. Like, I need to think about it. I need to talk to my partner about it. Yeah. Like, it's so common. So it really makes a big difference.
Yeah. In the martial arts industry as well, mom brings the kid and dad is at work. 100%. And, so, I mean, I think in a lot of industries, the partner objection comes up. I want to jam out a little bit more on sales, because I know this is an area of expertise for you. And I think our listeners will find a lot of value. What is your stance on scripts? So you said earlier, I'm like Batman and I have a tool belt, but yes. What's your stance on scripts? Should, business owners, when they're building out sales teams, how strict are we? Are we using them? You used the term framework earlier. So, talk to me about scripts.
I'm vehemently against the concept of scripts, like vehemently. I strongly believe in the process and concept that the salesperson is significantly more important than the offer itself. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't work really hard to make a better offer, right? But like, there's a whole concept, like there's a whole idea of like, you could sell ice to an Eskimo. Why? Because the offer is good? Because the ice is good? No, it's because the salesperson is good. If you have a quality salesperson, you're pigeonholing them into what you think is a qualified sales script. Even me, who I know that I'm very capable of developing that, I'm withholding the person I'm working with from being a great salesperson. I'm not wanting them to be a version of me. I'm wanting them to be the best version of themselves so we can support and prioritize our clients, which needs to be the number one responsibility in selling in the first place. The most common problem I see with this is people will basically put together a script. They'll wonder why the results aren't good. And then I listen and audit the call, and it's a non-natural conversation. They're not able to like articulate particularly the value they see in it, because they're trying to read a script. And the biggest problem that I see is it becomes an avatar conversation, right? So it's not Cris talking to Alex. It's salesperson talking to gym owner, right? But that totally defeats the whole purpose. The only time avatar selling makes sense is in one-to-many webinars or speaking on stage, because since you're not speaking to one-to-one to Jacob, you have to speak to probably what Jacob, Clarissa, Derek, name other 70 names, probably all think, right? So of course, like 80%, 70% is going to be, this is the avatar in general, but if you don't sell specific to the person, you're really messing up. So like, I'll give you an example. One of the most valuable frames that I teach my clients and I leverage in every single call on anything that I do is the secret weapon question, okay? So the concept of the secret weapon question is this baseline of open loop frames, right? Open loop frames is someone tells you something that's important to them and you repeat it back. So someone says to you, my max capacity at my gym, I don't know anything about this, so I'm making it up, is 150 students, right? And you're like, okay, how many are you at right now? 100. Okay, so you have a way to grow by a third basically, and you'll be at capacity. So just confirming, if I'm able to help you get to capacity, that would be a huge win for you. Perfect. Now that's specific to that person. If I speak to another person and their max capacity is 250, but I focus on the 150 because that's the average, I'm losing sight of the value of this, right? So the secret weapon question is always going to be a framework. Again, in marketing specifically would be something like, hey, Christina, I want to get a good sense of like what you're hoping for from a marketing partner. Like if you were to identify the most ideal, perfect marketing company for you, what would that be? You're putting the ball in their court for an answer that they really don't know because they're not intentional. 99% of people aren't intentional. What they really want is the same thing as the plumber metaphor. Chris, if your toilet breaks at your house, sorry for any bad juju, not trying to do that. If your toilet breaks at your house, what do you want the plumber to do?
Fix the toilet.
Do you care if he uses a snake, if he uses his hand, uses the vacuum?
Nope.
Are you really sure you don't want to use the difference between the vacuum 9500 with the reverse osmosis engine?
Just fix the damn toilet.
Exactly. So that's the thing when you ask that question, they're like, I don't know, just make me money. Like, just make me money. So when you get pigeonholed into, I'm just marketer guy or marketing gal, well, of course you're going to have a hard time in selling. So in a general sense, I try to remove all avatar opportunities from selling. I try to make it to this person specifically. So I'm very, very big on frames only, absolutely no scripts, period, especially at the end of the call with the tell to sell. The most egregious possible thing you could do in selling is give them a closing frame that they're reading, which most people are not trained actors, right? When you watch, I'm like a big movie buff. I love movies. So like when I watch amazing acting, like watching someone be very moved and I get moved from it, there's no time that I'm watching it being like, wow, that's such good acting. I'm just experiencing real life, but it is acting, right? Sure. In the same vein that most salespeople are not Leonardo DiCaprio. So them reading it, it's not going to be them. It's going to be some version of the salesperson that wrote it. And now they're like expected to deliver it well. And some people are good at it. Most people are not. So to me, it's if I could train the person with the frame or the concept of what I'm trying to get them to say, then it would be good. So when people are like, what are the secret weapon questions? Well, this is like the gist of it. It's not a question, it's a gist. What's the time result frame? Well, it's not a script that you read. It's just, hey, here's how long the call is going to be and the purpose of the call, fitting it into your specific way that you communicate, and then coaching that person through sales management or sales consultation to get to the best version of themselves. But this is like one of my strongest opinions in sales, and the most common thing that I see, especially agencies struggle with when they hire someone. They like make them read a script and I wonder, why is this so not working so well? You're just cutting them at the knees, basically.
Yeah, and very difficult to connect with the prospect as well. What are your thoughts? One more thing on sales. Thoughts on game tape. So listening to calls. This is an area for us at GrowPro that we know going into Q1 has to be a source of focus. We're kind of at that size where optimization is number one.
Absolutely.
And not just in the sales department, but
everything.
It's DS as well, right? Onboarding as well. Yeah. So, what would that typically look like to you in a sales department watching game tape?
Yes.
Maybe some best practices.
Yeah. And by the way, the CS and onboarding thing is also like what I call the second sale. I feel like a lot of people forget that. So much buyer's remorse when you get off a call. Like some people feel bamboozled sometimes after a call. They're like, wait, what just happened?
Yeah.
Did I just meet that person for the first time and I just took $2,000? How am I going to explain it to my wife? Oh my God. And they freak out. And then you get on the onboarding call and it's all their worst fears compiled. Like the onboarder doesn't even know the name of their business. Where are you located? Like there's no effort put in, which is such a bad look. And like when I'm coaching people, I'm like, can you just please, for the love of God, look up that their business is in Texas, look up 2 competitors, look up the reviews. Don't ask, please. Oh my God. It takes 5 seconds and it makes a huge difference. But anyways, side point to that. In terms of game film, like this is so important. One of the main things that I do in my consulting is like audit calls. And I just love doing that still. Unless I'm very weird, but unless I'm like auditing the call from the same person, they're making the same mistakes over and over. But like, I'm extremely passionate about like reviewing calls, giving them this insight that I know is going to like unlock the thing for them, that if they execute it the next time, they're going to win. I love that. It's like the best thing in the world for me. So in business, anything related to my son is the best thing in the world. But anyways, point being, so with game film, it's like, again, big sports fan. If you are just practicing, right? If you're just practicing, you're going to get to a certain cap, because if you're just practicing and the coaching is giving you feedback on it, but you're not looking at your own film of the game film and the practice film, you're not going to see the nuances that only really you could catch, right? And if you don't do that, you're going to miss out on massive opportunities. Like there's a lot of things people don't know about what they hem and haw about, what they seem uncomfortable with, where their tonality shifts, where they lose their confidence, where they're making a facade of themselves instead of being their authentic self. They don't know it because consciously they're not thinking it through. It's hard in a sales conversation to be fully present for a prospect while you're also having your own internal battle of like, am I asking the right questions and am I making the right sales approach? Am I going to get this sale, while also holding space for the prospect? And at the same time, as an overall thing, like, oh, remember from the last call that I did with Ricardo, I got to be better prepared. It's hard to like run through all of those scenarios at the same time. And so the most effective thing to do is auditing your calls. So I have like an SOP, I'll send it to you, of like how we recommend auditing calls and like prompts and questions. Because when I go to any sales company, I always will ask like, who's the highest earner? And then I want to talk to them first. And a lot of very good sales professionals don't have the paradigm to explain why they're good sales professionals. They're just like, yeah, you know, like they buy it. Yeah, it's like
I'm the only one on the team.
I'm just good at it, and yeah, that's it. They can't explain why, and the biggest reason why is because they haven't been taught or coached on a paradigm for that, right? So before I became a sales consultant, I was naturally gifted at sales, but the more books I read from Warren Clough, the more trainings I got from Ryan Stewman or Dan Henry or whoever it may be, the more understanding I got of like, oh, this is like a frame that I'm understanding, and now I could work this through. Now I can express myself to someone of how I did that, not just like, well, I did it. Mm-hmm. How? I don't know. And I think that's a really big miss for a lot of companies, especially big sales companies, where they're not auditing the calls. 2 ways. One, in a group setting where everyone can learn from the main sales trainer. And then secondly, auditing themselves, like educating themselves on how they can improve by themselves. So like to me, the 3 steps very specifically are, number 1, outside sales consultation specifically, or internal based off like whoever is the person leading the sales company, that they do a weekly review of 1 to 2 calls in a 2-hour meeting, and we break down certain frames, etc., in a totally open environment. No one's getting yelled at or punished, or that type of stuff is really not healthy in my opinion, but like good quality, like in growth environment. And huge kudos for, you know, Derek for stepping up to the plate and like letting us audit the call and then getting community feedback on certain things, open loops, etc. Then doing 1-to-1 audits on a at least bi-weekly basis. So twice a month minimum. If you don't do that, more than that, you're just going to really, really struggle. And then lastly, in my opinion, at least 1 time per week, every single salesperson in a company should be auditing one of their calls that they thought was more challenging than they thought it was. And also in the same vein, ones that they thought were a lot easier. And if you do that model, it will make your sales process significantly better.
Yeah. And just so many agencies, businesses just aren't, right? And the martial arts industry, it's hard enough to get, you know, school owners and their teams to at least do the role playing aspect of it. Nevertheless, you know,
there's so many responsibilities. You know, they got the class schedule, they have the school, they have the bills, they have the team that they have to do, they have their, you know, whatever, their apparel. It's like there's so many things. Like, how do you convince them that it's important enough? It's just getting them to the point of understanding, like, if you make this commitment, what's going to end up happening over a 6-month period is your team is going to be significantly better empowered. But most importantly, the new prospects that walk walk into your studio are going to have a 10 times better experience because they're better equipped to give them the value that they want. Not better equipped to take their money, but to give them a good experience, which ultimately leads to getting paid more money.
Yeah. So I want to dive into your shirt that you are wearing, Anti-Hustler. You wrote a book called The Anti-Hustler's Guide. What was the process like for writing a book? I have a lot of people that come to me because I wrote a book as well, and they ask me about that. Was it a labor of love?
Oh my God.
Just talk a little bit about the process, and then I want to talk about what that means to you.
The book was definitely the hardest thing that I've ever done personally or professionally. I wrote the book intentionally, like twofold, right? On the selfish business side, I knew having a book, obviously, for like sales consulting, especially for larger companies, is critical. For authority is critical. So obviously there was a business decision it made, but I also knew like the revenue from this is I'm not making money from book sales, right? I'll never make the money back from the time that I put in, even though like, of course, authority wise, it's driven plenty of sales, but it's non-attributable, right? It's like, how'd you find my restaurant? Well, I saw your billboard and like my friend recommended it. It's like, okay, where'd that come from? It's just like non-attributable, right? So the biggest like onus for me is, my mental health has been a big struggle for me from day one, really, in business, just because entrepreneurship in general lacks security. And when you're the only one that provides that security for yourself and for your family, it creates an environment of like, what is enough? And I didn't know what enough was. And so like I was a natural born hustler. Like I worked really hard to create that Miami Dolphins thing. So like to close that loop, right? I remember driving up to the training camp for the Dolphins and like rolling down my window at the person at the front, like security, and thinking like they're going to deny me. And I remember getting the badge and like looking at the Miami Dolphins 2014 media badge and looking at that and thinking for the first time in my life, like I made this happen by myself. Like I told you, like my agency grew a lot because of like my Jewish connections, which doesn't mean I didn't do any work. I did work, but obviously it was significantly easier than if I was doing it from 20 strangers, not, sure. Oh, Lloyd recommended you. Here's money. Like that was my sales conversations. Like, wow, I am one killer at sales, huh? Wow, I am really good at this. No. But like looking at that was like, wow, I made this happen by myself. I can't believe it. And how did I do that? Like, what was the takeaway? Perseverance, execution. I was like, this is how I have to be at all times. In the red on my car, at all times, pushing 100, no matter what. That's the only thing my brain understood, which was the inappropriate KPI lesson from, how I got my byline, how I work at the UFC, how I got the Miami Dolphins, how I got my agency to grow outside of the Jewish community. And so because of that, I was just hustling. And I was taking all the information in on other people that hustle. So like David Goggins, super into that. Like, let me listen to a podcast of a guy that's running a triathlon who's literally yelling at me to do better. I'm like, I love this. And no shade on David. Like his stuff's really good. Now I'm like, totally not interested. And then Jocko Willink, same thing. Like you got to wake up at 5 a.m. and if you don't, you're lazy. And a little bit of Grant, mostly don't like him now, but a little bit of Grant of like, do better, be harder, work harder. And then Gary Vee was like my only little alternative, where Gary was like the only person that I understood in this space that was like, work hard, but also have time and place for other things. So he was like my 5% insight for everything else. Was like, go harder, do more, you can do it. Yeah. That was like everything. And I was just buying into that. And hustle culture is prevalent everywhere. It's like on kids, like softball uniforms, it's in, business, it's in entrepreneurship, and we live in a capitalist environment. And trust me, I love being a capitalist, but like in a general sense, imperial capitalism, the concept is there's never enough because most people don't define what they want. So like people will say, and let me restate this. Like basically every time I do a training, the first slide I'll have is like, who wants to make more money? And of course, everyone raises their hand. I'm like, how much? And no one knows, because when you make more money, what do you want? More. Yeah, more. And when you make more money, what do you want? More. And then it just is a never ending cycle up until the point where you have been deemed financially successful by your peers, right? But then you don't deem yourself financially successful. And so what I ended up finding myself like realizing is I'm like a hunter-gatherer. And I'm very good at it. I'm wearing my loincloth and I'm running out of the, with my spear, and I'm getting the kill and I'm bringing it back and I'm dropping it on the table and I'm already ready to hunt. And before, like, as I'm walking out the door, my wife is like, we have enough. And it doesn't matter. I'm like red-eyed predator. I'm going to go kill, going to go get more. And what ended up happening was I ended up getting my heart problem to be a lot worse. So 4 years ago, on October 15, 2020, I had open heart surgery. When I was 18 years old, I was told that I was born with a bicuspid aortic valve. The long and short of it is just basically like 99% guarantee you have to get surgery on it, but usually it's for people that are like 65 and above. So like, okay, don't worry about it. Like, go live, which what? Like, it's impossible. So from the time that I was 18 to when I had the surgery at 29, my mindset the whole time was like, I'm going to have a shorter time span than others. So I have to work double, which is already in and of itself extremely unhealthy. Because again, I don't control how other people work or what they do. I only focus on what I control. But I was basically doing like the high school version of hustle culture. Like, they're doing better than me. I got to go harder. I got to do it better. I got to work longer. I got to wake up more. I got to sacrifice everything. I got to do it. When I don't have a kid, it's a lot easier to do. With my son, it's about 1,000 times more challenging. Having your son say, "Daddy, stop working," is a really rough thing to say. It should be that way for when your wife says it, but it's not. I'm just being blunt. It was not. Like when Cheryl would be like, "Stop working," I'd be like, "I'm doing it for us," like combatively, which, my bad, babe, I love you. But the whole concept, right, ended up being like, I get a message from the doctor, like, you got to come back in for, a consult. I'm like, why? And obviously could figure out, read between the lines. I had to have the surgery 10 years after they told me that I would have it in 40 years. Why? Well, obviously it has to do with overworking, anxiety, stress, frustration, lack of prioritizing my health, my diet. All those things led to my heart problem worsening to the point that I needed to have the surgery. And so when that happened, it was a very big wake-up call for me, based on another story in the book, which was I already had one of those experiences. I'll do this in a shorter format, but like when I was a freshman in high school, my dad had a massive stroke and almost died. He's alive and well, thank God, today. But he was the main priority, like, breadwinner for my family. My mom had just retired about a year ago prior to that, due to my dad's success, but he didn't have a business. He had a financial advising company, and he was the company. So when he gets sick, he doesn't work. When you don't work, money doesn't come in. No matter how much people loved him, at some point, if you're not working for a year, which he didn't work for almost 2, they have to find a different financial advisor. And so we lost our house that I was born in. My mom had to go back to work. My brother left school to start working. It was really rough, like very, very rough. And a lot of it, honestly, is like completely blacked out by my brain, which is like, I've learned later on, is like, was a protection mechanism. Cause like I have a hard time remembering things. Like Cheryl will bring up stuff, cause I met her in high school, like these things that we did. And I'm like, I don't remember that at all. I don't remember that at all. Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And so that whole thing was the onus of building the agency that I had originally, which was like, oh, I'll build this business and like build a team and I won't do as much, which I did, but then I still overworked anyways. And so when I was starting to write the book after my surgery, the whole concept was like, I lived through this, and I would really love for people to not go through that experience. If you're someone that struggles with mental health based off of like old high school drama crap, like looking at yourself in comparison to other people, which who cares about that? Or feeling like you're not good enough, or that you need to work harder, or that maybe hustle culture isn't right for you. And so for me, the whole mantra and concept of the anti-hustle model is basically letting not just human beings, but particularly entrepreneurs, ultimately define success in their own terms, and taking the time to really identify that. And I broke it down in the book into 3 frameworks, like define, design, and then do. Most people skip defining and designing. They just do, right? So they just take a lot of action for what purpose? They don't know, just for the accumulation of more wealth or things, or people's appreciation or whatever it may be. And they're always feeling like they can never ascend the mountain. There's no potential peak. There's no Everest peak. It's just a never ending ascension. And it's exhausting. At some point, you're going to like completely collapse. At some point, you can't win a race if you don't know the finish line. It's impossible.
Well, behind the mountain is another mountain.
Always 100. And that's part of like one of my favorite songs has that. It's a Need to Breathe song talking about like behind this ridge, there's always another mountain to climb. And that's kind of the framework that I am talking about. It's like, why don't you develop your mountain outside of what everyone else wants? Because you get to dictate it. That's the whole purpose of running a business, particularly an entrepreneur, where you have agency. You get to choose. You have no boss telling you what to do, when to do it, how to do it. You have you and you have your family, and you get to dictate how you want to live it, and no one else can tell you otherwise. And most people shed that responsibility. They let either a mentor tell it to them, or they let like a group, an avatar, identify $10,000 as success. Where did that become the thing? Like how did that become I don't even understand how that became, that's the KPI, that's the milestone, then 84,000, then 100. It's all facade. So like, was it a labor of love? I don't know if it was a labor of love. It was the hardest thing I ever did because it was talking about some very vulnerable things that I'm comfortable talking about, but like putting pen to paper and then reviewing it 1,000 times for making sure it's succinct enough, making sure it's good quality reading was terrible. Honestly, it was like the worst experience of my life. Honestly, writing it was horrible and very overwhelming. And then also like a huge realization of like, imposter syndrome. Like I'm writing this book for me as much as anyone else, and I'm still not following through appropriately. I'm hustling the end of my anti-hustler's handbook because I have to hit it on a deadline, and you just feel horrible about yourself. And so from the outside looking in, everyone's like, oh my God, amazing. You wrote a book. Congratulations. And I'm like, I hate myself. I want to be a hermit for the next 6 months. Don't ever talk to me. So people are like, Alex, when's like the audiobook? Why didn't you release it with an audiobook? It's like, if I did, I think I would have died. Like I can't. And they're like, when will you do it? I'm like, we're in an indefinite timeline. And if I don't put a timeline on it, like Parkinson's law will say like the work will expand to the time allotted. And since I don't have a timeline, I won't do it, which is ironically the whole thesis of the Anti-Hustler Handbook. Like I don't have a deadline for it, so I won't do it. And so we'll just do other stuff. So yeah, it was really hard. It was definitely the hardest thing I've ever done. I'm proud of it for sure. And I'm very proud of like the people that have actually read it. You're obviously like a voracious reader, but a lot of people are really not. So they'll like buy it or they'll get it because of my name, or I'll give it to them and then they'll have it like as a paperweight, which cool. Like I get it, but like reading it is the goal. Like I put a lot of effort and work into making it a great read, fun. It's a choose your own adventure book, which is supposed to be a lot of fun and like an assessment based model. But ultimately like the impact it can have if you do the work is really amazing. And like getting the affirmation from the book, probably the most special type of affirmation I've ever had. But yeah, definitely the hardest thing I've ever done.
Well, thank you for sharing that. When's the next book coming out?
Hell no, definitely not. No chance.
Yeah. I think being an entrepreneur for the last 13 years, there's different chapters that we all go in. And, I'm sure I have a love-hate relationship with Facebook memories when they pop up, right? And it's like you see some of your status updates. And I will say there's a lot of like hashtag hustle, on my posts. I think what you said in terms of defining success is you have to start there because everybody's definition of success is different. I work out at a local gym, and there's a lady that works out there that owns an online business, and her definition of success is the freedom of just getting to do whatever she wants whenever she wants. And financially there is like a cap and a ceiling that comes with that, but that is what is success for her. I think one of the hardest parts as an entrepreneur, and I shared this at your event, is this concept of like your business always being broken, like no matter what point you're at. And I had this thought like, once I cross 1 million, everything's going to be easier. And then it's like, 2 million. And it's like, no, it actually just the problems get bigger. They get a lot harder. Sure. And I think that, because the work is never done, it feels incredibly overwhelming. And I'll never forget, I was sitting in my living room and working on my laptop, and Cruz comes up and he calls me Other Mommy. So like, Other Mommy, will you play with me? Right. And that's how, that time is how kids spell love. And it's like, of course, I'm working, buddy. And he just looks at the laptop and he just shuts it, closes the laptop. And it was like, okay, yeah, the work is going to continue to be there. But
for sure,
I think that we have to be careful of falling in line with like what you said, what a mentor tells you you're supposed to do, or what this avatar, says you're supposed to do. What I struggle with is I truly love doing the work. I consider myself a creative person. And I have built a business to a point where I want to say 90% of the stuff that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, I absolutely love. There's about 10% that, typically like the finance stuff.
Sure.
Which I did get connected with Clever Profits from your event.
Strong recommendation.
Yes. I've been working with Blake. He's been great.
He's the best.
So that I don't have to look at as many spreadsheets. But I think that, at least for me, I find a lot of enjoyment in the work. And I find that I don't really look at it as work. I look at it as growth. And I'm, very fortunate to have a spouse that supports my need to work on the weekends. And, I think everybody has, a different mindset. Is that good? Is that not good? Like, I don't know, you do you.
Yeah.
But for me, putting in 3 hours in the morning before everybody's awake, like,
it's an extra credit like mindset. But I think that's the whole point of it. It's like, I don't get to dictate for anyone what is or is not appropriate with how they spend their time. Like, I'm too busy on making sure that I prioritize my time correctly. Like, I'm the exact opposite. Like, first of all, in case it's unaware, like, my wife was 5 months pregnant when I had my surgery. My son was born 117 days after my surgery. Like, everything in my life is revolved around him and her. That's what it should be, but it's cognitive dissonance, because of course that's not how it is. When I'm here at this office, I'm not with him right now. And when I do the math of how I spend my time, the majority of my time is spent on business. It's not spent on time with my son, and it's not spent on time with my wife, and it's also not spent on time with myself. And for me, that's not okay. It's very uncomfortable. And trying to figure out how to get a better percentage is extremely challenging, because in many ways, there's a lot of things I really love about it. And in many ways, there's a lot of things I don't. And the same thing as being a dad or a husband too. Like, it's not like being a dad at all times is roses and daisies, he's a little terrorist sometimes, he's very hard to deal with sometimes. But in general, like, I just want more people to have the opportunity to just define it for themselves and do the work to do so. Like, most people just won't do the work. They would just bypass it and focus on doing every other type of work, either because one, they're like afraid they don't know what would achieve like happiness or success for them, or they're like fearful of judgment. And it's like, you don't need to have open heart surgery to like stop worrying about other people's judgment, hopefully. And then secondly, in terms of if you don't know, this is the most common thing. Like, there's a trope for it. Like, you shoot for the stars, land on the moon, right? So if you're like, I will only be happy once I have Bugatti Veyron in my garage, right? And then you work your ass off and end up getting a gorgeous, 2024 red Corvette, which I believe is what you have. And you're like, wow, I'm so happy. It's not like, oh my God, I didn't get the Bugatti. No, you're going to be happy, right? Like, and if you say, oh, I'm going to only be happy when I'm not working on Fridays, and then you're not working on Fridays and you feel amazing, fantastic. Like, it's okay if the goalposts move, as long as they're your goalposts. Yeah. Like, if you're letting someone else define them for you, you're taking away the greatest opportunity you have as an entrepreneur, simply because you won't do the work. And so I have a training in the actual book, and you can find it at antihustlehandbook.com, which is completely free to get it, called the Success Calculator. And it's this framework: define, design, do. You define exactly how you want your life and day to be. You define it with a calculator, so mathematically you can win. And then you just do the work instead of just skipping the first two and do a bunch of work and then maybe it will all fall in line, which it just never does.
What do you see the future of, digital marketing, POD, your, agency? Where do you want to take that?
I think in terms of the future of digital marketing, this year is really interesting because it's probably the first year in the last 10 or so maybe where something genuinely new has come into the market that will completely disrupt everything, which of course will be AI. The one previous to that probably would be like smartphones probably. And the one previous to that was probably like the initial boom of digital marketing, like websites and SEO. Ever since then, like outside of those three things, very few things have been like actually transcendent or completely unique. Whereas many of the things, like obviously SaaS was different, but it's not like no one's ever sold SaaS before. Sure. It became more accessible through high level in the same way that like selling funnels became more accessible through ClickFunnels. But like people will be like, I had the most interesting, unique business ever. I'm like, what do you do? They're like, I sell SEO to chiropractors. What are you talking about? It's the opposite of unique. What do you mean? What? But that's how human beings have to compartmentalize. So I think that's very interesting. And I'm very interested to see like how the market reacts to it. Because a lot of people will like not do their due diligence on AI and they'll just sell the product and then of course not deliver upon it, which will then create the I've been burned before objection, which of course happens a billion times over and over. So like how fast that will happen is something I'm really interested in. Probably like April would be my assumption, that every single person that you speak to by April has already either heard of the AI offer or invested into it and probably got burned already. So how are you going to differentiate yourself? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like a double race. It's a race to get the initial clients and it's a race to deliver the high quality. And the person that can hit the Venn diagram of we got it fast and we got it good, they're going to win out. Unfortunately, a lot of people are really cool with like collateral damage with clients, which I just think is not appropriate. Well, they'll be like, we'll get it out fast and bad, and then we'll keep doing it. It's like a big thing. I'm not a big video gamer, but like it's a big thing in the video game market. today's very similar to this model, where it's like they're rushing to get something out for Christmas that's definitely not finished, but they know it will be purchased, and then they'll just optimize it from there, which is messed up in my opinion, but it's kind of common. So I think that's probably the main thing in the digital marketing space.
How are you implementing this at Sky, right? Or
so I'm going to tell you something I haven't told anyone yet.
Ooh, first to hear it right here.
Literally first people to hear it, because I'm going to tell it to my community on Wednesday. So I have been averse to AI for the first whatever year and a half or so since like ChatGPT came out, mostly due to ignorance. Like just like I got to stay on my path, and I'm not ready or willing or able yet to invest into understanding how this operates. The more time that passes, the more obvious it is that this is not a flash in the pan clubhouse, and more clear it is like this is a complete disruptor of every industry, and will be the day-to-day same thing as, the iPhone that was 2006, I think, I don't remember, but something like that, where now every single person has a smartphone in their pocket, where originally it was like flip phone, and that was a big jump, right? Like who's there for the T9 texting?
There are days I wish I just had a flip phone.
Yeah, for sure. There's no, especially like ADD and like the human attention span. It's just really interesting. Like I'm very interested in like a long-term study, kind of understanding like how our human and brain chemistry changed over, from like long form content to short form content, outside of business, just like as human beings in general. Cause like people don't go to movies anymore. They don't want to watch things longer. Like the idea of having like a younger person watch Godfather as an example, one of the greatest movies ever. Like, I don't think someone can actually sit down for a 3-hour session and watch a movie. You have to
when a new movie comes out, I'm just like, I'll just wait until it's on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And then you go to buy it on Prime and it's like $29. Classic. And it's like, well, still absolute cheaper than going to the movie.
Literally. We just did that with The Wild Robot with Ellie. So that's kind of my thought with like the market. I think the other one is like, I kind of break down the market. I did this at the event of like into 3 like core components, like the original boom of digital marketing, then like the ClickFunnels era and the high level era. And like the format of it really simply was like the original era of digital marketing was only traditional media companies could be involved in it. So you have to like have an MBA, you have to have a legitimate business, you do, direct mail advertising, or you do television or radio. And now emails are a thing, and SEO is a thing, and websites are a thing. Complete Wild West. Pricing would range from, you talk to someone who got a website in 1995, could be $500 or $50,000. You don't know. It's complete Wild West. Then High Level came out, and that was like the beginning of the biz op era, the coaching era, obviously, the info product era. Russell, obviously an absolute genius when it comes to this. And it's like one funnel away, all selling high ticket online sales funnels for any business you could possibly imagine at all high ticket pricing. And then High Level came in originally as a tech stack provider. Like you're doing all these tech things, you're using ActiveCampaign and using Calendly and we're going to do it all in one at a 10th of the cost. You're like, wow. And people were reselling that to High Level's realization of, oh, that's our business model, and then changed it to SaaS. And so the thing that I find really interesting is like the average consumer is getting the same offer. Like, I will grow your gym, I'll grow your chiropractic practice, I'll do this. 2 to 3 years ago or so, it was like $2,000 to $4,000 a month. Now with SaaS, it's like $300 to $500 a month. And they don't understand like the discrepancy, like what happened? How is this the same offer, but the pricing is totally different? So I think like race to the bottom is very common. I do the opposite. I do like a very premium product on both of my companies for that exact reason, so that I can work with high quality people. And it just makes it easier. So that's kind of what I think with like the marketing world. I'm interested to see like how the biz ops side goes with High Level continually trying to grow like their younger market, high schooler market, and their older market, like 30, 40 somethings that want to leave their 9 to 5 and start side hustle businesses, and see like what ends up panning out with SaaS. I personally don't think like the High Level SaaS model will pan out for the large majority of people. It's a flash in the pan. Like they'll go in, they'll realize, holy crap, this is really hard to get 34 clients at $297 a month, which is 10,000. I'm going to stop. Or they're going to pivot to the hybrid model, which I think is the ideal model, like high ticket sale, like services, usually ads, plus SaaS. So you have the stickiness plus the offer. I think that's what we're going to see. How AI integrates into that is going to be the delivery service. But yeah, so in terms of the bearing the lead here, what I'm doing for AI. So for my marketing agency first, I'll say we're testing AI intake for our attorneys. The issue with that is liability concerns and what's legal or not. And there's no case law on it at all. Meaning pretty much 99% of the attorneys we talk to about it are not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. They'll rather pay more. So we're investing a little bit of money into it to see if we can be the first on it. But it's a concerning thing. Like I don't know if I'm wasting money on it, because we're spending a decent amount of money per month, like for a team member to teach, like understand how to develop this, language model for, this intake that may never see the light of day. So we'll see. And then secondly, for POD, and this is really cool and I'm super excited about it. Basically, I took all of my sales training inside of the program, about 3-4 years of sales coaching calls that we did. And I put it into a language learning model that's built off of ChatGPT, which I really wish was built off Claude because it's so much better, but that's whatever. It's for a totally different day. From a company called Maybe Tech, huge shout out to them. And they built an AI Alex. And so I'm unleashing to my clients an availability model. So I'm wearing the champ hat, right? I am wearing the champ hat.
Yeah.
So the champ hat is like my mantra in my company for being caring, helpful, available, motivating, and proactive. And available is the trophy, right? Availability is the best ability, right? So like I'm a huge like sports fan again. So I'm a big Dolphins fan. The problem with our quarterback Tua Tagovailoa is if he gets injured, he's not available, and then we're the worst team in the league. When he plays, we're a lot better, right? But if he's injured, doesn't matter how amazing he is if he's on the bench. And that's the same concept. Like if I'm not available for my clients, which inherently based off anti-hustle model, I can't be there for them at all times, right? Even though they want me to be. So it's this weird dichotomy. How can I facilitate availability? Leveraging AI. And so we developed this AI that if you ask any sales question at all, it has all of my insights and trainings and will direct you to specific like Loom videos I've shot or whatever. It's pretty good. I'd say it's probably like 85-90%. So we're launching the beta literally next week for the first time for our clients, which we're really, really excited about. And then our goal hopefully would be to do that for every coach in the program. The intention of that isn't so that we have a lower cost of our team. That could be eventually. The bigger one is, can we have availability on a 24/7 process where if a client asks a question to Alex and AI Alex in a sales in a Slack channel, they get an immediate answer, and then I could follow through with any additional nuance or context that then I would also feed back in to the AI bot that will inherently get it better. So that's probably the biggest thing I'm doing with POD for it, and I'm very, very excited. We haven't announced it yet to our clients, so really looking forward to that. It's been an exorbitant amount of effort to do so, but I'm really looking forward to launching that.
So in our company, we have core values, but we also have culture values. Core values are, the promise that we make to our clients, yes. And our culture values are the promise we make to ourselves and the environment. And one of those is your best ability is your availability. 100%. We actually have it printed out there on the wall. I'm a big
believer of that.
Yeah.
That was one of my mantras, by the way, for like going through the surgery. So like I had 2 big mantras in the prep for the surgery while my wife was pregnant, which was like best ability is availability, best ability is availability, and I will get to the other side. I will get to the other side. I will get to the other side. That was like 2 of the most important consistent themes and mantras I had. Because of COVID, I found out in December 2019 I would have to have the surgery. It was scheduled for March, COVID, pushed to June, COVID, ended up happening in October. So the surgery was crappy for sure, but the 10 months of waiting was way worse than the surgery itself. Literally terrible. So that was like the 2 main things I had in my brain at all times.
So as we begin to wrap up here, it's already been an hour.
That's crazy.
Right?
That's wild.
Yeah. Any just, maybe like last final piece of advice that you would want to give, an entrepreneur? And it could be anything from anti-hustle to sales to just general. You work with a lot of entrepreneurs. So what can we send them off with?
Please just give yourself more grace. It's probably the number one thing I would say. Like a lot of people don't appreciate like their own lack of discipline or look at other people. Like I know I find myself looking at your stuff, Chris, and you're constantly like showing up for yourself and for those that follow you. Like you're always in the gym, you're always on the go, you're always doing the work, right? But I also know in Chris's world, not the window that you share, right? There's something that you struggle with just like anyone else, right? And I think the window dressing that we have of social media, especially for new entrepreneurs, but also veteran entrepreneurs, right? They like compare themselves to other people, which doesn't benefit you literally in any way, ever. And at the end of the day, like 99% of people are their own worst enemy. So I got this amazing piece of feedback from one of my coaches earlier on in my career, and I try to share this anytime with someone. I was at a small mastermind in San Diego, and there was a lot of vulnerable conversations happening, like ultra vulnerable, which is kind of my field. And I was sharing my stuff. This was a year before my surgery, so I didn't even know I was going to have it. And some person was talking about like how they never feel like they're good enough, yada, yada, but they have all the characteristics of being successful, very financially successful, life and family. And everyone's like, what don't you see about it? And he's like, well, I could be better at this and could be better at that. And it's like, you could always be better though. There's always ways to be better. And the person that was leading the event said, let me ask you a question. If I had a microphone for the internal person, not the one talking to me now, just the internal person, and what do they say? And the person went on to say you're not good enough. You don't have the discipline to do this. And all these like negative affirmations, which is rough. It was really rough to hear. And it was even more rough because one person was saying it and 10 people were thinking it like, oh, that's me. So he doesn't curse at all. He's a religious person. He said, okay, so I want to ask you a question. If I was working with you every day and I was telling those things to you, you weren't hearing them in your head. I'm saying you're not disciplined enough. You're not good enough. What would you want to work with me? And the guy's like, oh, fuck no, definitely not. He said, then why the fuck are you listening to him? And everyone just went completely quiet. And we had like a good 5 minutes of literal silence where everyone was reflecting upon how much they are their own worst enemy and how much they're punishing themselves for not being perfect when you give so much grace to so many other people. And most people think like, oh, people don't give grace because they're the most disciplined. It's like the most disciplined are the 1%. The 99% are undisciplined, including me. And I'm trying to get better. That's why I wrote the book. It's why I hired the personal trainer. It's why I dedicate time to being a better father or husband or business owner. It doesn't mean I'm perfect, and I'm not. And I have a lot of times where I'm thinking I'm not good enough or not doing good enough for my family or my clients or my friends or whoever it is. You can always find things you could do more. I could call my mom more. I could be available more. I could dedicate myself more to religion. There's always things you can do better. It's impossible to be like, man, I'm just slaying. I'm just killing the game at it and everything. I'm amazing. Almost no one does that, especially entrepreneurs. So if you are listening to this, please give yourself a little bit of grace and then listen to this carefully. Do the work. Now, when I say do the work, that doesn't mean like do all the other stuff that's not the work. Like, what's my logo change? Send that email, do the cold email. I'm talking about journal, talk to yourself, do the therapy for yourself if you're not going to do it with an actual licensed person, which most people don't do. Just do it. Like, prompt yourself on this fear that you have, this challenge you have, this thing that you have, and then write it down so that the emotions are not driving. They become the passenger and your pragmatism drives. Emotions are incredible, amazing passengers and horrendous drivers. They will drive you straight off the cliff into the worst portions of your life. And I know this directly, especially so after writing this book, having the surgery, having my child, being alive, and then still thinking, oh, now I'm going to do it all right. No, I don't do it all right. Even after all those things. Of course, thinking after the surgery, the first thought I have, never going to do those things again. Never going to eat like an idiot again. Newsflash, wrong. I'm going to work out all the time. Newsflash, wrong. I'm going to be perfect in my work-life balance. You know the next step. That's the concept. So give yourself more grace and do the work. The work that matters is probably the thing I would leave with.
Resonates very, very much so. I recently read a book called Meditations for Mortals. And two of my biggest takeaways was, one, behind the mountain is another mountain. And two was trying to live a life where you are trying to progress towards your potential. It's like, who even knows what that potential is? And typically it's some perfect, thing that you cannot reach. And I'm also a huge fan of Dr. William Attaway. And
the best.
He is. I had a call with him last week. And we talked about this concept of, 99 people can tell you you're great and one person tells you you're not, right? Like, and that's what you focus on. And the main reason why I booked the call with him, because I was having a lot of doubts in my own ability to lead this company to a place that it's never been before. I've never ran a $10 million company. I've never ran a $100 million company. So having a lot of those self-doubts, and, he talks a lot about keeping a win journal, and what you focus on expands. And I think that journaling and getting it out of your head and putting pen down to paper you can really turn that into a superpower.
100%. This win journal scenario that I've been working on with William on for a while has been the most important thing to me, because I told you at the front end of the podcast, like, I'm definitely a words of affirmation person. I want people to tell me that I did good work or that it impacted them. Like, I want this is the weirdest way possible to say what I'm about to say, the victim impact statements. Positively. I want the affirmation impact statements. I want to know. And in the beginning of my career, especially in coaching, because I'm an extraordinarily passionate person, when I pour into someone and they do it, I know they're going to get the result most of the time due to the coaching. And then they'll come back and be like, this amazing thing happened. But the amount of times that happens is significantly increased over time, but the impact that it has decreased over time. And the impact that negative feedback had increased over time, but also increased in how it affected me, which is very unhealthy. So I'd write down all these wins journals, but I did one extra step that made a big difference. Because when I looked at the wins, I just kind of gloss over them. Like I'm looking at it as an avatar, not as the actual thing I helped this person do. It's like, oh, I helped another agency, not what that person's telling me did or affected them. And there's one big thing I did, which was evaluation of decisions. Another thing William talks about is this concept of, what's the word? He says, experience is not enough. Evaluated experience is key. And so when I make big decisions, I put it in a journal and I'll write, this was the decision. And then I'll report back on it upon further review, right? And there's like another sales technique where people inherently can't make bad decisions. You can only make a bad decision in hindsight, obviously, unless you're sabotaging yourself. But like bad decisions only happen once you go through the decision, realize the result, and then revert back to, oh, I should have done this. Like, oh, I bet on the Super Bowl and the other team won. I should have bet on the other team. Well, yeah, that doesn't help you. Like that doesn't benefit you. That was a bad decision. That wasn't what you thought the plan was, right? So in general, when I do like big decisions in life and business, so like I chose to do this instead of this, or I chose to hire this person, I always write those things down. And then I look at what decisions worked. And when I look at the decisions that worked, the inspiration I get from that is like nothing else, because it's a really good win of like, I can trust myself that I am capable of getting where I need to be, because most of the time I make the right decisions. And even if when I don't and I evaluate it, there's something to be learned from, and the stakes aren't as high as I make them think, whether it's like my life or death situation or the business is going to collapse tomorrow, which like never does. And I think that has really, really benefited me so much. So if that could help you guys, please do it. Again, it's about work though. It's like, it requires work to take the evaluation time to be like, okay, I'm going to evaluate these decisions. And I do it at least quarterly, which has been super beneficial. But anytime that I'm in emotional turmoil, which unfortunately is too much to be frank, that's the first thing I do. I like look at my decisions and I'm like, look at that. Look at that decision you made. That was a great decision. And here's a decision that's still in progress. What's my current thought on that in progress decision? Pretty good. And then instantaneously, I'm like, I'm good. I can do this. I can make this happen. It helps a lot.
Alex, if people want to follow you, what's the best way?
Try to spell my last name. Good luck. That's the best thing. First coach I ever worked with, Chris, told me I should have a stage name. And I said, you don't understand who I am, and we should definitely not work together. I'm a big believer of my name being very important to me and to my family. So if you want to spell it, it's Schlinsky. I'm on all the platforms. Probably the number one place to follow me would be YouTube, which is Schlnsky, but you can find me. You can do
we'll link everything in the show notes. Well, Alex, thanks so much. I really enjoyed our talk on sales and hustle culture and businesses being broken and entrepreneurs being enough. So thanks for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Peace.